Where are we at in society today? Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Every single week, I put my freaking heart and soul into this. I don't go out there and laugh. It's not funny. It's not fun. Nothing's funny to me. I don't want to go out there and get embarrassed on Monday Night Football in front of everybody.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
So ain't nothing changed from yesterday. Still the same person I was yesterday. And I got the same thing for you that I had yesterday. You know why I'm here.
You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
A lot of times when I watch games, I try to figure out, do you need a superstar to win? Whatever sport, whatever level, do you need that dominant figure? And if you believe that's the case, then you probably don't believe in Michigan State basketball. I don't believe that's necessarily true. I would say more oftentimes than not, we have on this show gone over a number of times where you don't need that superstar quarterback. That's for sure. We've gone over teams in the playoffs that don't necessarily have a superstar in baseball. But in college basketball, generally, the old belief used to be you got to have a really good backcourt to reach the national championship game. Michigan State has the most balanced team in America, and they keep on rolling. Welcome, everybody, on a Wednesday. Glad you're with us. X's and BrO's, Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. I'm Matt Shepard. Michigan State extends their winning streak to 13 consecutive games last night. They blow out Minnesota 73-51. This was never a ball game. It was leading wire to wire from start to finish, from the opening bell. Throw in whatever cliche you want. Last time State had this type of stretch was 2019 when Tom Izzo and company went to the Final Four. Jaden Akins led MSU's attack with 16. Carson Cooper was a point shy of a double-double. Trey Holloman scored all 12 of his points in the first half, including a stretch in which he made 3 triples within a minute to extend the lead from 11 to 20. I think to be exact, it was within 53 seconds. They led by as many as 22. They never trailed in the game. They're the only team in the top 25 to have one player average 10 points or more per game. They've got 7 guys who average 7 points per game or better. That's really impressive. What's the most impressive thing about that? Yes, the balance. Yes, the coaching. I think it's the willingness for players to accept it and embrace it. I think most players at the collegiate level are looking at how, unless you're realistic and you're the 8th guy off the bench and you've been the 8th guy off the bench for 3 years, and the first year you either had to redshirt or didn't play at all, and you know you're not going to the NBA. You probably know that you're not even going to Europe. Guys can make good money going to Europe. You know, guys can go to Europe and have a nice career. Some of these places pay you pretty damn good money, and some of these places pay you a nice little stipend here and there, and in cash oftentimes. Anyway, these guys oftentimes will look at it and think, I can play at that level, so I got to get mine. That's what they're oftentimes thinking. I've got to get mine. Michigan State doesn't play like that. They play with, obviously, incredible balance, but they play with an unselfishness and a willingness to accept who they are. And I really respect that. I love that they can beat you in so many different ways with so many different players, and that those players are willing to say, it's his turn tonight, or I'm going to pass this up to give us a better look. They're going to rotate the basketball. They're going to share the basketball. They are going to stay connected as one. Oftentimes, I think in sports, we use appropriate cliches. And I have said this one a lot of times. The closest unit, perhaps in all of sports, is the offensive line. They work as one. One guy messes up, it can screw up everything. So they have to work in concert with one another, perhaps more than any other unit in sports. Michigan State feels like it's an offensive line, and a really good one. The way they work together, and it's not just the five guys. I mean, another guy, a couple more guys come in, and suddenly you pick up right where you left off. And look, I'm not saying this just because they've won 13 in a row. They're now 9-0 in Big Ten play. They're the only undefeated team in the Big Ten. They're ranked 7th in the nation, could be moving up, depending on how they do when they go to USC, whatever. I say it because it really is unique. What's the last team you can recall that won a championship or competed for a championship and didn't have that star player? Usually when we're talking about teams in our NCAA tournament bracket, we're looking at these teams and we're trying to handicap, are they going to get, what kind of shot do they have? We circle a certain name. Yes, the tradition of that team is important. Yes, the tradition of the coach we feel is important. We'd probably argue that with Nate Oates in the past, but we get it. We gravitate, especially our picks, toward recognizable names, recognizable institutions. Michigan State is that. So oftentimes people will highlight the Spartans wherever they are. And I was looking at a mock bracket yesterday, and it had Michigan State as a 3 seed. And I thought, who is smoking pot while trying to put this one out? It made no sense to me. But Michigan State doesn't have the big name out there. They don't have people on ESPN coming for game day at Breslin Center and saying, we're going to highlight the equivalent to Cooper Flagg wearing green and white today. They don't have it. And I think that's the beauty of it right now. I love the fact that this team has taken on this belief and this characterization of a true team. TEAM. Nothing's bigger than the team. You better believe it. That's how Michigan State plays. That's how they played again last night. That's why I gave you the statistic that I did, that there's only one team in the top 25 that has one player averaging 10 points or better. And it's MSU. 7 players averaging 7 points per game or more shows you the balance that this team has. It doesn't mean that's what they have to win, but it's what they have done so successful. And to buy into that after 20 games, we're at the 20-game mark. All right, we're well past the halfway point. We're at the halfway point of college basketball in the conference standings for the most part. And yet they have still been this type of team. Kudos to MSU and kudos to Tom Izzo and his staff for selling it that way and making sure his guys understand it and believe it. Pistons will finish up their 5-game road trip with a jump in Indiana tonight. Detroit has dropped 4 of their last 6. They're 1-1 against the Pacers. But Indiana is one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now. They have been on a roll, winning 9 of their last 11. Here's our poll question. Who has been the worst new coaching hire in the NFL? Pete Carroll in Las Vegas, Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas, Liam Cohen in Jacksonville, Mike Vrabel in New England. No, I did not put either Lions assistant coach because you weren't going to vote for him anyway. So we gave you those 4. You can vote as often as you like. Follow us on Twitter at XP Mornings. We'll give you the results in the 8 o'clock hour tomorrow. I'm not trying to influence your pick, but I will tell you what I think and handicap some of what we just discussed on the poll question when we come back on X's and Bros. This hour of our program is proudly brought to you by our friends at Ferris Coffee there in Grand Rapids, owned by family business for 100 years and the official coffee maker of your Detroit Lions.
Get ready for
We touched on this yesterday just a little bit regarding the new hires in the NFL and their press conferences. How much do you really care if a guy wins the press conference? I hope you don't. I hope you don't get caught up in that. I think we've seen enough of it here in Detroit to know that it doesn't mean anything. But there are 6 new coaches. Mike McCarthy is not one of them. He was let go by the Dallas Cowboys, replaced with Brian Schottenheimer. Mike McCarthy has said he's going to wait for the cycle of 2026. So he's going to sit this one out, if you will. And it's also, I think, kind of interesting that Cliff Kingsbury has took himself out of the New Orleans gig, saying in so many words, like it here in Washington. I'm going to be the OC there for a while. But 6 guys have received new assignments, if you will. Brian Schottenheimer is in Dallas. Pete Carroll is in Las Vegas. And then, a guy who has averaged 9.5 wins per season from 17 through 23. Aaron Glenn, as you know, is now with the Jets. Ben Johnson, of course, is with the Chicago Bears. New England brought in Mike Vrabel, and Jacksonville with Liam Cohen. Again, not that you care too much about winning the press conference. He seemed a little odd at the press conference. And on top of that, afterwards, you do these press conferences, and then a number of members of the media then want you for a what's called a one-on-one. All right, you take your sound bites from the press conference, and then all these TV stations. Okay, now you come over here, you do this for a little bit, you do that for a little bit. It really defeats the purpose of the overall press conference because everybody wants the one-on-one. And quite honestly, when they're done on the podium talking to you, eventually they come down and the media swarms you yet again and ask you all the questions that they wanted to ask, but just couldn't do it in the more public setting. So which of those let me give you the grades that the USA Today gave these head coaches now. And tell me if you think you agree specifically with the Lions assistants. They gave Brian Schottenheimer a C. Here's what they said. They said he really hasn't done anything in the NFL so far to suggest he's the kind of Kyle Shanahan level coach who can elevate your roster with his schematic prowess. So adding more talent is key. It's not fair to Schottenheimer to write off what he's capable of as a head coach, but it's also a struggle right now to understand this will be that different for Dallas. It's about agreeing with Jerry Jones. That's what it's about. Brian Schottenheimer didn't say as much, but you got that sense in how he was wording things and how glorified Jerry Jones was to him in the press conference. And it's funny how that press conference shifted immediately to Jerry Jones. There's a part of me, just a part of me, that almost feels sorry for Dallas Cowboy fans. I know they're obnoxious. Are they as obnoxious as Kansas City Chiefs fans right now? I don't know. I mean, could anybody be more obnoxious than New England Patriots fans during the Tom Brady era? Probably not. Maybe we ourselves have been obnoxious in the past. Outside forces would be able to tell us that a little bit better. But they gave that hire a C. I knew right then and there when reading this article, because this, even though usually you go right to the people you're most familiar with, where do they have Ben Johnson? What's the grade? Where do they have Aaron Glenn? What's the grade? I wanted to read this one in succession. Pete Carroll in Vegas, they gave a B-. Vegas missed out on Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson. Aaron Glenn and Liam Cohen would have all been better. Aaron Glenn, who I thought handled himself very directly. I thought he was really good in his press conference. Again, doesn't mean a ton, but afterwards, when the media surrounded him, they tried to get him to talk about Aaron Rodgers, and he basically said, look, you're not going to get me on this, okay? So they said, let me take it from a different angle. What do you look for in a quarterback? He talked about toughness. He talked about commitment. He said the right things. Again, that doesn't mean you're going to be a good head coach, but he did say the right things, and he would not budge. He would not give in whatsoever. He's a tough dude. You could tell he played. You could tell he played with an edge. You could tell he was a defensive player too. And they gave that a B to the New York Jets. Mike Vrabel, I thought was a really good pick. I mean, if you would have told me or asked me who got the number one choice, I would have said New England with Mike Vrabel. I thought he was the perfect fit there in New England, not because he played there. I just because of his resume, I thought he was the prize of coaches or available coaches out there in this past offseason. So Vrabel,
I was shocked he wasn't hired in the last cycle.
Me too. I would agree with that.
Because that he doesn't seem like a guy that needs the extra year. Whereas, like, Belichick took the extra year. McCarthy's now going to take the extra year. I thought Vrabel should have been scooped up.
Yeah,
the year off.
He went to Cleveland as a bit of an advisor because he's good friends, with members of the staff there. Maybe sometimes it's really good for you. Usually that doesn't. I mean, think about that in any other profession. Oftentimes, once you're out. You're off that radar.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and he wasn't doing. It's not like he was doing TV work. Like Rex Ryan wants to get back into it, right? Oh my gosh, he's interviewing for the Jets job, and he's telling everybody it's not going to be a country club, and it's not going to be this, and it's going to be. I mean, all the right things to say, which is idiotic. All the right things to say while you're looking for a job. That's why he's still in studio. Anyway, I thought Mike Vrabel was the perfect fit. I mean, he's been. I think he's got a proven track record of what his capabilities are. Didn't always have the best talent. They gave New England a B+ with that. This is the one that shocked me. They gave Liam Cohen an A- going to Jacksonville. They said he spurned the return of Tampa. I told you that story for the job in Jacksonville. He's got to maximize Trevor Lawrence. The circumstances a little frustrating, especially for Tampa, but one of the best offenses in the NFL last season, should have plenty of fun scheming up a Jaguars offense with electric young talents like wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr., running back Travis Etienne, and, of course, Trevor Lawrence, which, okay, fine. I mean, that's some talent on that side of the ball. Does that make him the right coach? This is why I brought this up yesterday or 2 days ago, or maybe on Monday. We take the coach as a coordinator and shift them to a new team where they can accentuate that team's strengths right now. That's what we said about Aaron Glenn. He's going to a New York team. Their offense isn't very good. They've got some talent. I like Garrett Wilson. You do too. I like Breece Hall. You do too. But it's their defense. Where is their strength, right? That apparently was Aaron Glenn's strength. Liam Cohen going to Jacksonville. Jacksonville's strength is on which side of the ball? Well, they do have some, you could argue, two really good defensive linemen. I wasn't close enough with Jacksonville to truly understand what their strengths were, but when you mention those three players on offense, you feel pretty good about it. I wouldn't have given them an A- by any stretch. And I'm not even sure I would have given the Chicago Bears an A+, which is what they gave. I probably would have reserved that more for Mike Vrabel. But Ben Johnson, and you know damn well what they're going to do. They're going to associate Ben Johnson with the offense. They say Johnson is the flashiest play caller to land an NFL head coaching job since Kyle Shanahan joined San Francisco in 2017. Shanahan has never had a quarterback as talented as Williams at his disposal. I don't think Brock Purdy would take too kindly to that. What did we see this year from Caleb Williams that makes us think he's as talented, if not more, than the accurate play of Brock Purdy? And I know a lot of people don't like Brock Purdy. I'm asking the simple question. I'm not suggesting one player is better than the other, but I think herein lies a little bit of a trap for us. He was 1-1. How good does he have to be? You know he's got to be really good. He won. Look, you got 1-1 against Mr. Irrelevant. You got a Heisman Trophy winner to a guy you didn't even know what school he played at, let alone whether or not he was going to be a good player. Anyway, they associated with that. They said his tenure with the Bears should be an exciting one. They give him an A+. Our phone number on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text the program Sports Radio to 21,000 as we get rolling on a Wednesday morning across the state of Michigan.
Saturday night, April 26th.
Hey, remember yesterday we had talked, and really it was before yesterday, we just brought it up again yesterday there. We have always suggested, look, just because Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn were really good coordinators, Liam Cohen, you could say the same thing. Just because they were really good coordinators doesn't mean they're going to follow in the footsteps of Mike Tomlin and Jim Harbaugh or John Harbaugh, where they were good coordinators and then became really good head coaches. Jim Harbaugh is probably a bad example because he wasn't necessarily the coordinator, at least not at the NFL level. He jumped right to being an NFL head coach. But oftentimes that's the ladder you take, right? Those are the steps you take. Just because you're really good at one doesn't mean you're going to be a really good head coach. Steve Spagnuolo is a really good example. 4 times won a Super Bowl, but as a coordinator. So we said you can always go back to being a coordinator. And we've talked about Robert Saleh. He's going back to San Francisco. He was their defensive coordinator, then became the head coach with the Jets, and now is the defensive coordinator in San Francisco again. Another coach is doing the same thing. Matt Eberflus was the head coach of the Chicago Bears. We all are well aware of the mistakes that he's made, especially on Thanksgiving Day. He is the new defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. So he takes over there in Dallas on the defensive side of the ball after going 14-32 as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Has been a defensive coordinator in Indianapolis before. Now, it made me wonder just a little bit because Mike Zimmer used to be the defensive coordinator there when Mike McCarthy was the head coach. It made me wonder, what if Matt Eberflus, like people got so upset with Ben Johnson, which I think is just ridiculous, to go from OC in Detroit to be head guy in Chicago. What if Matt Eberflus, who was available and fired by Chicago, what if Detroit had hired him as the defensive coordinator? Obviously, this is a big what if. How much would people in Chicago care? They wouldn't, because he stunk as a head coach. How much would it matter to Lions fans? He's been a DC before. I think you get linked and associated with your past failure or success unless you're going back to a team that is familiar with you and that fan base with you, a la Robert Saleh in San Francisco. I bet you they don't care in San Francisco that he wasn't successful as a head coach in the Jets, because they'll say, that doesn't matter to us. We know their defense was pretty good. What matters to us is how good he was as a DC for us in San Francisco before he took that head coaching gig. I just thought it was interesting that that was announced yesterday. We had been talking about it, and I wondered just a little bit how people might have felt with him going from Chicago to Detroit, since we saw it the other way around. The reason people in Detroit were upset is because Ben Johnson was successful. He was really good. You don't want to lose him. I get it. And you sure as hell don't want to lose him to a division rival. People in Chicago probably would have laughed their ass off had he become the DC in Detroit. All right, baseball. Who would you put on the cover of MLB Show 25? This is, the video game that so many young people love to play. It's an quote-unquote honor to be on the cover. And this year, the cover is filled with Gunnar Henderson. It's filled with Paul Skeens. And it's shared with Ellie De La Cruz. Super exciting players, no question. Not that I thought there would be a Tiger on there. I know people, Tarek Skubal. No. Tarek Skubal is 28, 29 years old, all right? This is about the video game that embraces a dynamic era of young MLB talent. They wanted to go with young stars with the video game to celebrate his 20th anniversary, because they are looking at right now, and the future of baseball is what it's all about. And you can pre-order it on February 4th. It's available on March 18th. I don't know how many people play the game. All right, I don't play video games, but whatever. I'm not judging here. So Skeens, obviously the National League Rookie of the Year, really good player. If you were taking the best players, you'd be putting Shohei Ohtani on there. You're putting Mookie Betts on there, maybe a Freddie Freeman. You can just put the Dodgers on there, for crying out loud, right? I mean, hell, their backups are as good as most people's starters. Who would you have put on there? I don't think there's a Tiger that belongs on there. I know your heart tells you, Tarek Skubal because he won the Cy Young and he's the best left-handed pitcher. Yes, agreed with that. And he deserves an extension. Absolutely, no doubt about that. But we're looking at an age thing here, and we're looking at somebody who is a big name right now with a younger player. I thought Bobby Witt Jr. should have definitely been on the cover. He's only 24, and he's already, I would argue, one of the best players in all of baseball, despite the age. I don't care how old you are. Give me Bobby Witt Jr., really good shortstop defensively, power, speed, average. Find me something that kid cannot do, and it'll be the first time you've educated me. I don't think that's the case. I think he's really good at everything. I would have put him on the cover because, look, Ohtani's the best player. Bobby Witt Jr.'s a top 10 player. I was wondering maybe he's a top 5. He might be a top 5 player right now. So I would have put him on there. I like the choice of Gunnar Henderson. I like the choice of Paul Skeens. I understand the choice of Ellie De La Cruz. You talk about electricity. That dude is electric on the base paths. And you can only fit 3, right? I thought about Jackson Merrill. Jackson Merrill's the really good-looking center fielder for San Diego. He's just 21. But the other name that I thought should be on there, and I think he's been on it before, so maybe this. But what about Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? He's only 25. Doesn't he seem like he's been in the league for at least 10 years? But he's only 25 years old. You talk about a player who should get a contract extension. Like we're wrapped up in Tarek Skubal after one good year. Look at the number of really good seasons from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You would think Toronto would be in a little bit of a hurry to do something like that. Who would be the guys you would put on this cover? All right. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was on it in 2024. Fernando Tatis in 2021. Bryce Harper in 2019. Aaron Judge the year before. Shohei Ohtani was on it in 2022. Okay. So you've had those big names.
If you were going for excitement, which, that is the criteria, how about Juan Soto in a Mets uniform?
Ooh, that's good.
I think that would be awesome because he's now the highest paid player and everything, and you just got the huge deal, and it's new and it's exciting. Yeah. It's the shiny new toy type of deal.
Yeah, I don't. To me, I'm not sure how much a guy makes should matter. I think it's about his age and about how good he is. He's a really good hitter, obviously, right? Now, is he as great as we've made him out to be baseball-wise? The national landscape of Juan Soto being one of the greatest hitters of our lifetime is a joke. It's a farce. It is. I'm not saying he's not a really good hitter, but he's got to do it for an extended period of time in order for us to truly say he's one of the greatest we've ever had in the game. Maybe in your lifetime, but from the game standpoint, pump the brakes. We are constantly taking an individual today and wanting to elevate them to the Mount Rushmore of their sport. Here's another good, and by the way, it's not just the media, and it's not just fans. You heard what Ryan Day said after Ohio State's national championship win, right? Saying this team, this national championship team, would have beaten last year's national championship team, a la Michigan. And the immediate thought was, hold on a second. This year's national championship Ohio State team didn't even beat this year's Michigan team. And you think you're going to beat last year's national championship team? Pump the brakes, dude. Just enjoy the experience, the limelight, the spotlight, the accolades, the parades, the championship trophy, and appreciate what it took to get there. You don't have to go overboard. I think we've gone overboard with Juan Soto. It's not that I don't think he's a really good hitter. I do. I think he's very good. I think he's one of the scariest hitters out there that you could face because I don't think he has many holes, and he's willing to take walks. He's got an unbelievable eye, okay? He's a hard guy to strike. I like all that about him. I just think we get too caught up in the here and now that we want to be part of. We want to be part of history. That's what it is. So we take a guy, Patrick Mahomes is probably a bad example because it's incredible what he's done. All right. 5 Super Bowls at the age of 29. Tom Brady, I think he was in his mid-30s before he got to 5, somewhere around there. So that's probably a bad example. But immediately, it's even before this year, it was he's one of the greatest ever. It's like, hold on a second. Can we let the kid or the guy breathe a little bit, let him play and appreciate that? I get it if people want to say it about LeBron James in basketball. But people are starting to say that about Anthony Edwards. Hold on a second. What are you talking about? Just relax for a minute. Just let him be, okay? Is Anthony Edwards better at his sport than Connor McDavid is at his? I don't think so. You want to throw that out around Connor McDavid? I get it. Anthony Edwards? And neither one of them won a championship. If that matters, if that criteria is part of the conversation, then yeah, I mean, you got to, if you want to take that into consideration, that kind of validates my belief when it comes to a guy like Juan Soto, or it comes to, validation with a guy like Anthony Edwards, for example, even though he's won a gold medal with Team USA. Then we could get into the Connor McDavid with Team Canada and all that other stuff, and we don't need to do that. But I don't think it matters how much a guy makes. I think it matters, I don't think that's why Shohei Ohtani was on the cover. I think he was on the cover because he's the best player. But I do like that suggestion. That's really good. It's about what your status is. But he's already arrived, right, Trent? He's already arrived as a superstar in the sport.
Hence the contract
baseball.
Extension.
Hence the contract. It wasn't even an extension. It was a new contract. A new contract for the Mets. Contract extension would have been with the Yankees. Wasn't.
Yeah, right.
New contract for the Mets, right? New contract for Ohtani with the Dodgers. These young players that they have, and it tells you that the sport's in a really good spot, right? Paul Skeens, electrifying player. Let's hope there's no sophomore slump. Gunnar Henderson, really good player. Ellie De La Cruz, would pay to watch him play, right? But I love a guy like Bobby Witt Jr. in his age, and I think even though Guerrero Jr.'s been on the cover before, doesn't mean he couldn't grace it again, especially considering the year he had. And the other thing is, he doesn't, being in Toronto sure doesn't help him. Being in New York helps a lot of players. Not that Aaron Judge doesn't deserve it, but think of Mike Trout in his prime years and I know he's in LA, but think if he were playing in New York or Boston, for example, and the type of love that he would have got, I would have guessed even that much more. Miguel Cabrera, really good example, instead of being in Detroit. And I know Los Angeles, you're going, wait a minute, that's the second largest TV market in the country, and so on and so forth. Shohei Ohtani was out there, right? How come the Dodgers get it? The Dodgers are one of those elite franchises in sports, not just in baseball, but in sports. The Angels are not. And when you're playing that late at night, then not as many people see you. So I think people understand that. Our phone number on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. And the text line, sports radio to 21,000. If you had to have a Tiger on there, let's say you wanted to have 3 Tigers. Let's say it was just the Tigers version. Who would the 3 Tigers be? I thought about this last night. Tarek Skubal's an obvious one.
He's the no-brainer.
Riley Green's a no-brainer, too.
I think so, too. So then it comes down to that third spot.
And it does. Right. It comes down to the third spot, and you're asking yourself, who would it be? And I've got a name for you that perhaps, just perhaps, a lot of people may not feel is necessarily deserving, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I thought of this name, and then I read an article in The Athletic where Jim Bowden said, for what it's worth, I know Jim Bowden can be a little polarizing. He wrote about certain players that he's excited to watch take their game to the next level. One of those players wears a Tigers uniform, and it's Parker Meadows. And it's Parker Meadows because when you're looking for a player who, not that he does it all, but who has the overall game to get you excited, he's it. Steals bases, an electrifying defensive player, 20 home run power and can hit at the top of your order. He's that kind of guy. He is not a 5-tool player, because if you're a 5-tool player, you got to hit more than 20 homers. I think a lot of guys have home run capability. All right, we're not talking about Adam Frazier here, but it's not. You wouldn't consider him a power hitter, okay? Whereas a guy like Mike Trout, who was a 5-tool player, could do all those things and then some. We're talking about a guy who's 40 home run power-ish. That's not Parker Meadows. He would probably be my third player on the Tigers cover. Who am I missing?
I considered Colt Keith for a second, just off the top of my head. He's not half the defender Parker Meadows is. So I think you like we said, Skubal and Green are obvious. I think Parker Meadows actually probably is the right call for the third guy. Okay. But you could make an argument, I think, for 5 or 6 dudes. You can make an argument for Javi Baez just because he looks cool and he makes a lot of money. And he,
what?
If they put Javi on there as the third guy,
did you just say he looks cool?
Yeah, he does.
What's your criteria for the cover?
He's flashy. If you're putting 3 players on there, you got to have someone with some flair. Skubal and Meadows don't really wear the accessories. Javi's got the chains and the earrings. I'm telling you, this is what the kids want, right? We're talking about the kids here. We're talking about the 14-year-olds.
No, actually, I'm talking about you as a person who would put them on the cover, not as a kid.
Well, best 3 players, it's not even close. I wouldn't even consider them, obviously.
I don't think you can make a case for 5 or 6 at all. There is absolutely no case for Jake Rogers. There's no case for Matt Vierling. There's no case in my mind for Gleyber Torres or Cole Keith or Kerry Carpenter.
So to you, it's cut and dry, those 3 guys.
I think it's a reach for Parker Meadows, to be honest with you. I just think that's the only guy that you really could say you could has that overall game that would be in the same realm of the other 2 guys that I mentioned. It's probably just 2 guys. There's no right answer here when it comes to a third guy, which therein lies part of the problem. Right?
I was going to say that's probably the right way to answer.
We're having a discussion about what we hoped or should be, and it's not even close. When we come back, best college football game this year that you witnessed. We'll get to that on the other side of X's and Bros on a Wednesday morning throughout the state of Michigan.
Huge here for the Michigan High School Athletic Association.
Second hour of the program. Glad you're with us on this Wednesday morning, wherever it is you may be listening. Maybe you're in Cadillac listening to us on WKAD, The Ticket, 93.7 FM. Maybe you're in Lansing, WVFN AM, 730 The Score. No doubt flying high and feeling really good about Michigan State's win last night at home, their 13th in a row, blowing out Minnesota. We'll get to more on that here in a moment. Maybe you're in Grand Rapids, that also encompasses Kalamazoo and Holland through the airwaves on WMAX 96.1 FM, The Game. In Petoskey and Charlevoix, WMBN 104.7 FM, The Ticket, Northern Michigan, or in Traverse City, beautiful area, WKAD 93.7 FM, The Ticket. Maybe you're watching us streaming on YouTube and Facebook at X's and BrO's, or on Twitter at XB Mornings. Thanks for the time. We appreciate it very much. Speaking of MSU, in case you missed our headlines earlier, Michigan State cruising to a win over Minnesota. They never trailed in this game. They were up by as many as 22 in this game. They had a couple of players reach double figures. They didn't shoot the ball super well. They rebounded the hell out of it, okay? But they also defended like nobody's business against Minnesota, and they've won 13 in a row. The final score was 73-51. Could have been a lot worse than that. Last time State had this type of role was 2019 when they won 13 in a row, and Tom Izzo's team went to the Final Four. I am not saying they're going to the Final Four, but they are a national championship contender. Before the season began, it was teams like North Carolina who were championship contenders. They were beaten last night by Pittsburgh, and Michigan State beat them earlier this year. I'm not suggesting that North Carolina no longer is in that conversation. I'm telling you, we oftentimes don't get it right before the season begins. Give it a breath. Give it some time. Give it some space before we decide on who the best teams in America are. 20 games deep out of a, 33, 34, 35 game schedule is a pretty good indicator on how good a team is. Michigan State is 9-0 in the Big Ten. They're not going unbeaten in this conference. That's okay. But what they are is the best team in this conference. They don't have the best player in this conference. Big Ten Network last night asking Bruce Weber, who had tennis shoes on with his suit. Can we get rid of that?
I was going to guess you're probably not a fan of that, are you?
It looks so stupid. Okay, it does. It looks even dumber with an older guy doing it. Like, if there's young guys, okay, I get it. But you've got one anchor in a suit and nice shoes. You got another guy in a suit and tennis shoes. It's enough already. It was a fad. It sure as hell shouldn't be done by Bruce Weber, who's in his late 60s. It looks stupid. All right, he had purple shoes on, purple tennis shoes on. But I digress. They asked him the sixth man of the year. He brought up a number of players. They asked him the freshman of the year. He brought up a number of players, including Jace Richardson, by the way. And they brought up the player of the year. The best team and coach of the year he has as Tom Izzo. But the player of the year, there's no Michigan State player on there, and nor should there be. But as a team, they play the best team game, not only in the Big Ten, but you could make the argument the best team game in America. I'm sure there are others, okay? They're Auburn, Tennessee, Duke. Other teams feel like, hey, we deserve a little love. Alabama plays a really good team game. Michigan State is the only top 25 team in the country to have one player average 10 points or better. They have 7 players who average 7 points or higher. Some people will say going into the NCAA tournament, Michigan State, if it continues at this rate, should be a very high seed. I could argue, depending on how long they go in the Big Ten tournament, they should be a 1 seed, but that's reserved for SEC teams in the ACC, but whatever. And I know the Big Ten hasn't had great success. Their last national championship was MSU in 2000. I get it. All right. I mean, you've had other teams play for it, but nobody's won it. But I don't think those 1 seeds should automatically be reserved for Kansas. I mean, Kansas was okay last night. Did you watch them? They got plenty of scare, and that's at home. They haven't lost back-to-back home games at Fog Allen since, I think, 1989. It tells you something about their dominance and how good Bill Self's teams have been. But look, they're susceptible. Every team, as we all know, is susceptible. It's what makes us really excited about the NCAA tournament. But Michigan State, as a team, they play as well as anybody in the country in that regard. And for me, their acceptance, their willingness to do that. When you have success, I think it's almost human nature where you start to get a little bit full of yourself. It's something Tom Izzo has warned about his team all season long. I told you this the other day. When he says, I think we're pretty good, that tells you something. They're better than pretty good. That's number one, because coaches are hard to satisfy. They are, as many good things that happened last night, I guarantee you, just him driving home, him and his post-game show, a lot of his quotes afterwards, or even privately thinking, he's like, you know what, we've got a long way to go. Of course they do. Every coach is going to say that. BrO's Pearl's saying that about Auburn right now, and Auburn's the number one team in the country. We've got a long way to go. They don't want kids or teams in general to get satisfied. It might be a little different at the professional level because those guys have been there, done that. Andy Reid doesn't have to say that about Kansas City. I hate to bring up the Chiefs again, but he's not, because the Chiefs know what it takes to get to the mountaintop, and they've done it for back-to-back years, and it helps to have the best player in the game doing it. Jaden Akins led Michigan State with 16. Carson Cooper had 9 points, 11 rebounds. Trey Holloman scored 12 of his points, all 12, in the opening half. And he hit 3 triples in a 53-second span that extended the 11-point lead to a 20-point lead and officially became a blowout. Wire to wire, beginning to end, tip to buzzer, Michigan State dominant against Minnesota. Pistons are going to close out their 5-game roadie with a game at Indiana, who is playing really good basketball right now. They have won 9 of their last 11, but the two teams have split the 2 meetings so far this year. Here's our poll question, and one of those games, by the way, was the very first game of the year at Little Caesars Arena. Who's been the worst new coaching hire in the NFL, do you think? Or who was the worst new coaching hire in the NFL? Was it Pete Carroll in Vegas, Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas, Liam Cohen in Jacksonville, or Mike Vrabel in New England? I did not put neither Ben Johnson nor Aaron Glenn in there because I don't think Lions fans would have voted. Now that I think about it, maybe they would have said Ben Johnson just out of spite.
Resentful. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're resentful. So I was bringing up college basketball. I got this question for you. This is a hard one to answer, but ESPN Plus had an article about it, and it made me think a little bit. What was the best college football game you watched this year? That was a tough one.
I think probably Texas Arizona State.
Right.
Yeah.
The Texas Arizona State game, to me, was really fun to watch.
It was the most exciting towards the end, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of points. Big name guys stepped forward. Had just about everything you could possibly want. Had drama. The 4th down throw from Ewers to reach overtime, and then on the very next play, throws it in overtime for a touchdown pass. I think you were kind of tugging back and forth emotionally on which team you were rooting for. I thought it was the best game that I watched this year. They didn't have that. There were 919 Division I college football games this year, from August 24th, 2024, when Georgia Tech upset then 10th ranked and well overrated Florida State, to January 20th of 25, when Ohio State beat Notre Dame in the national title game. 919 Division I games, more than any other year we've ever had, obviously because of the extended playoffs. So I wondered how many lineages, how many links did they have to any Michigan-based teams in their top 100 games? We'll get to that on the other side, plus an awesome line by a future NFL Hall of Famer about what the NFL considers a big event. We'll play a little game with that when we come back on X's and Bros on a Wednesday morning.
Get ready for the big game and stock up on home team favorites like buy five, save $5 deals at Meijer. Mix or match hundreds of items like assorted varieties of DiGiorno frozen pizza, 24 packs of Coca-Cola or Pepsi products, plus deposit where applicable, and Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue or marinade sauce. Buy five, save $5 this week at Meijer. That's the good life. A good deal better. Exclusions apply. See all deals in store or in the Meijer app.
What's up, Michigan? You're listening to Shep. Don't forget the huge show later today at 3 on the Michigan Sports Network.
Saturday night, April 26th.
Carry on my wayward son.
Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort welcomes multi-platinum legends Kansas. Tickets start at $47 and are on sale now at the box office or online at etix.com.
Just in the wind.
Don't miss Kansas live. Another Fork in the Road tour at Soaring Eagle Saturday, April 26th. More at SoaringEagleCasino.com.
The Freddie the Pizza Man Foundation is dedicated to providing support to families and Michigan schools touched by autism. We invite you to join us in supporting these families and schools by making a donation at FreddieThePizzaMan.com. With your donation, you can help provide essential resources that can make a real impact. Visit FreddieThePizzaMan.com to make a donation and to learn more about the foundation's mission. That's FREDI, thepizzaman.com. Together, we can make a difference.
There's a new player in town. Hi, I'm Herman Moore, Lions All-Pro wide receiver, and I'm talking about Eagle Casino and Sport, the real money mobile casino. It's so easy to play. You can go from wager to winner to wallet, just like that.
Sign up now and we'll match your deposit up to $1,500. Or you can get a risk-free bet up to $1,000.
Eagle Casino and Sports, made in Michigan, made for Michigan.
Must be 21 or older in Michigan to play.
Just prior to the break, we were talking about the top 100 games. Really, it was more than that because there's a lot of games that are tied. So there's 3 games that they put down as, or 2 games they put down as tied for 82nd. We're referring to the ESPN Plus article. How many teams associated with the state of Michigan or the city of Detroit are in there? There are 5 of them. Okay. Number 82 on their list is the Game Above Bowl. The Game Above Bowl was played at Ford Field. It pitted, no pun intended, Toledo and Pitt, and it went to 6 overtimes. Now, that's the first time that's ever happened in bowl history, to go that often, 6 overtimes. Pitt deciding not to go for 2 points and win at the end of the first overtime might have been, a bigger problem for Pat Narduzzi and company, but it really was an enjoyable game. It was a thrilling game. It was exciting. It was one of the best bowl games out there. So that was ranked at number 82, which I got to thinking, man, I mean, if those were 2 bigger teams, even if it's Arkansas and North Carolina, it's probably ranked higher. Anyway, locally, Eastern Michigan against Central Michigan. And by the way, there's 2 teams from the state, 2 teams that have been mentioned more than once in this poll, for what it's worth. And Eastern is one of them. The Eastern Central game, and I love these regional MAC matchups. I love Eastern against Western, Central against Western, Central against Eastern. They're special. As a MAC guy, I think they're really special. Anyway, 47 Eastern, 38, Central Michigan, 34. Now, the Eagles finished 5-7 under Chris Creighton this year, but they played in a couple of really exciting games. So that's 47. 46 was Toledo against Eastern, 29-28. This was 2 weeks apart, where the Eagles had a 12-point lead to Toledo, and then nearly won on a Hail Mary. Didn't work out for them. They go for 2 points after the Hail Mary, and they come up short. But that was one of the better games. And the reason I bring this up is because I give ESPN a ton of credit. They're not focused only on SEC football. They're focused on games all over the country. This took some time to put together. So far, you've got 3 teams or 3 affiliations with the state of Michigan. Number 29 is Michigan against USC. And number 18, and this is what I wondered. I'm wondering, okay, will Michigan be in there against Ohio State? It was not a great game, was it? That I can recall.
That's what I was thinking too. I thought it'd be in the top 100, but I didn't think it would be as high as I think you're going right
it's
here.
18. It's
yeah,
18.
I think that's kind of high for a game.
So I do too. But then when I was thinking about this, and I thought as soon as I read about it, I'm like, come on, 18 wasn't a great game. And then I thought back and I said, wait a minute, why wasn't it a great game?
Wasn't high scoring.
There you go. Why does it have to be? That's exactly what I said to myself. Why does it have to be high scoring to be a great game?
I don't think it has to. I just think.
I mean, it's the first thing you and I thought of.
Yeah, I mean, it's an indicator, but I also think.
So it was a really good defensive game for both teams. Was it good defense or bad offense? It was terrible offense by Michigan because they had bad offenses all year. It was a bad game plan, we thought, collectively. And I think that's a fair assumption by Ohio State. But 2 really good defenses. Why do we have to be entertained only with offense? Do we say that about a 2-0 hockey game? Would you rather see a 2-0 hockey game, Detroit against Tampa, or would you rather see an 8-7 game like the Oilers used to play with Grant Fuhr in net, who's a Hall of Famer, which is fine, but Chris Osgood should be in there too because he's got 400 wins, but I digress. Well, why is it that has to happen? Why can't we take – let me ask you a question. I've talked twice already about how good Michigan State was last night in basketball. Do you think that was a great game by Michigan State? I've talked about how they share the basketball and how nobody is bigger than the team and how they are connected with one another. Did you see their shooting percentage? Nothing special there, right? So what is it? Basketball, you can gloss over it in basketball because you can get to the free throw line and you can still get 80 points. All right? You can shoot 40%, get to the free throw line 22 times, and get the number that many of us feel like, okay, that is what you should be. Okay? That to me was entertaining. I mean, Minnesota scored 16 points in the first half. Why is that entertaining? Tell me that.
Yeah, it's not unless you're a Michigan State fan. Unless you're watching for that reason, then it's not entertaining.
100%. So defensively, was the Lions Commanders game super entertaining?
Of course not. No,
I mean, Detroit couldn't stop them, right? And I was pissed off about it, and I think Lions fans everywhere were pissed off about it because the defense didn't show up. We want a balance, right? I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
We want. What's the balance? How many points is enough to satisfy us between us saying that was an entertaining game or it wasn't? And I thought, man, what a hypocrite I am. I mean, come on. Let's be real here. We want entertainment, but we view entertainment on the offensive side of the ball in football. Why can't we be entertained defensively? Why can't we appreciate really good coverage, really good pressure, really good tackling? Why is it's more important for us to be entertained with moving the ball up and down the field, big runs, highlight reel catches, escapability, and throwing on the run for first downs?
Because I just think human nature, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, and I think you make a great point. Yeah. Human nature, that's what we want to see. Most of us, at least. I shouldn't speak for everybody. But, Shep, this is a big reason why Thursday night football numbers are down, because those games usually aren't great games. They're not high scoring. They're not, two teams that aren't necessarily well rested. There's a lot that goes into that, and I know that's the NFL. But
they're down, but they still draw bigger than anything else out there.
Because it's the NFL. But compared to Monday night,
NFL,
Sunday night.
There were some really good NFL games. Detroit and who did Detroit play after Green Bay on that Thursday night? That was a pretty good game from what we can recall. Because I was complaining left and right about how they only get a week off after Thanksgiving, after the short week. And I thought it was unfair. I think we had that conversation.
Yeah, we did.
It was the first time this has really happened. And yet
it was Green Bay, by the way, because after Chicago on
34-31. It was 34-31. How was that not entertaining?
No, I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was. But that is, if you look at the other Thursday night games, though, that was kind of, I don't want to say an outlier, but there were plenty of bad Thursday night games.
More oftentimes than not. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah,
more oftentimes than not, the Thursday night game is less eye-pleasing than Chicago didn't play on Thursday night very often. They weren't very pleasing to the eye because their offense is terrible. They gave up a ton of sacks.
Right.
I thought of this while I'm watching Michigan State play Minnesota, and I'm happy MSU's winning. And for me, I'm watching State with a different, obviously, vibe and emotion than I am watching Minnesota. Minnesota scores 51 points. What made that game so great? The game wasn't good. It wasn't a good basketball game. It was for MSU, but it wasn't a good basketball game. The Michigan-Ohio State, you have to really appreciate, just like MSU basketball, you got to appreciate team basketball to appreciate this team this year. In order for you to appreciate the Michigan-Ohio State game, and the last regular season game of the year, you had to appreciate defense. You have to appreciate the sport in a different way than you're used to. That's all I'm saying. Our phone number on the Meyer hotline is 866-838-4843. When we come back, this is going to be fun. This is kind of an awesome take by a future Hall of Famer on what a joke his sport has used for its postseason game. We'll talk about that when we come back on X's and Bros.
Get ready for the big
Back with you on X's and Bros on this Wednesday morning. We're with you Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. This hour of our program proudly brought to you by our friends at Meijer. You know where the Pro Bowl is, right? The Pro Bowl is at Camping World Stadium in Orlando. All right? And events begin tomorrow. Tomorrow through Sunday, for the second straight year, Pro Bowl events will take place there. It's, Central Florida, NFL. NFL.com is down there. NFL Network is down there. They're doing everything they can to promote it, and they should, right? Here's what they have. They've got a ton of festivities. They've got skills challenges. They've got the 7-on-7 flag football game. It's the stuff that nobody gives a crap about. It is arguably, for a league that does so many things well, they might have the worst all-star game, if you want to call this an all-star game.
Yeah, I don't even think it's close. I think they have by far the worst.
I think the NBA is pretty damn close.
But this isn't even a game. I mean, this is dodgeball.
This isn't even what's real. It's like some of these leagues, it's so stupid what they do. The NHL, we're going to do a shootout, but not in the playoffs. The NFL, we're going to play a game, but it's 7-on-7. It's flag football. It has nothing to do. It's nothing to do. It'd be like the NBA doing a 3-on-3 game. Let's just do a 3-on-3 game, They don't play defense in the NBA. We've gone over that time and time again. The NBA All-Star Game is an absolute farce. It's not even worth the time. You can give it a quick headline, but no way should it be a discussion on a talk show. It's just not good. But this NFL Pro Bowl which is I don't think a Pro Bowl any longer, has seen 23 players say no, thank you. 23. They've said, you know what? Enough is enough. We're not doing it. When you look at some of the names, Lamar Jackson, you're not going to be there. CeeDee Lamb, nope. Josh Allen, bye-bye. Max Crosby, no thank you. 23 names like that have opted out. It has forced people to, again, laugh about it a little bit, right? I mean, Drake May's going to be in this, Trent. Drake May, Russell Wilson, they're going to be in it. The best of the best. All right, NFL, that's who you got. Nothing against those two players, but they're not deserving of that. Like on the Football Reference, Russell Wilson can now say he was a Pro Bowler.
Yeah, Mac Jones and Tyler Huntley have made the Pro Bowl in the last 5 years. That's why a lot of this
stuff doesn't matter. When I talk about how many Pro Bowls a guy makes, I mean, it's just a number that we want to associate with him. So, for example, J.J. Watt made 5 Pro Bowls. I think it's fair to say, as a multiple winner of Defensive Player of the Year, it's okay to use that as a statistic, if you don't mind. He's got a great name for it. And we're going to get to that here in a moment. First, let me get to the phone call. The Meijer hotline, 866-838-4843. That's what you got buzzing right now. And Meijer is bringing you this hour of X's and Bros. Who's up on this Wednesday?
We've got Mark in Gun Lake. Pistons, actually, Shep.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Shep. Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, thank you. Appreciate you asking.
Good. Yeah, that NBA All-Star game, when Isaiah Thomas won the MVP twice on that, that's when it was really fun to watch, and it's not fun to watch anymore. It's just a layup drill, But anyways, the Pistons tonight, they can really do. I do love the NBA. I just don't like their All-Star weekend. But the Pistons tonight, I think they can make a statement if they can get into Indiana and win that game. That's what do you think? What do you think their chances are tonight?
Well, I'm interested to see how they respond. I will say that from the blowout loss at Cleveland. They're a lot closer to Indiana than they would be Cleveland, that's for sure. But Indiana's playing really good basketball right now. I really like Tyrese Haliburton. I think Siakam's an underrated player. I like both those players a lot. I oftentimes look at rosters and who's got the better roster. I think Indiana's clearly better from a roster standpoint. Right. I don't know what kind of statement it makes, but look, I mean, we're getting to that point, Mark, to your point. What are we, 46 games in? They're 500, right? 23 up, 23 down. These are the teams. Right. I mean, if you want to stay in that hunt and you want to avoid playing that extra play-in game, these are the games that I think are really important for them. It's tough because it's the last game of a 5-game roadie. It's tough because Indiana's at home. I know that's not the be-all, end-all. It's not like Detroit doesn't have any road wins this year. It's not like Indiana hasn't lost at home. I mean, they're 12-7 at home, I think, so far this year. So I don't know what kind of statement it makes, but I'm interested to see if they get back to, Mark, more than anything else, what had made them successful in their spacing on the floor and their shot selection. I don't think it was very good against Cleveland.
Okay. Yeah, I flew out to Seattle to watch the Sonics and the Pistons when they had Rashid and the five that went all the way. And I was watching Ray Allen shoot the ball, and when I watched him, I was like, God, I can't believe how this guy can shoot that. In warm-ups and stuff, he was hitting like 5 or 6 from half court in a row, and then I drove down to Indiana to see the Pistons against the Pacers, and Reggie Miller was playing. And I was like, man, this guy is just as good as Ray Allen was when he was in warm-ups. That guy was firing it, and it was just unbelievable. But I got to get on my route here. So
thanks, Mark. Always appreciate it. Always good to have our daily chat. That's the those are also two of the greatest shooters of all time. Throw in Larry Bird, of course. You throw in Steph Curry, obviously. Klay Thompson is probably in that conversation. But yeah, I mean, you just saw two of the greatest. Not just three-point shooters. I mean, those guys were really good from tough twos. Those guys were really good from 16 feet and so on and so forth. That's the thing that I really like watching. I like watching guys who can hit that shot on a regular basis. Detroit right now, in case people were wondering, Detroit is the 8 seed. Milwaukee is, or I shouldn't say Milwaukee, Indiana is the 5 seed. And Indiana can catch Milwaukee easily. They're just a game back of the Bucks right now. Cleveland's rolling away from just about everybody. They've got a 5.5 game lead on Boston in the conference, and in the division itself, they've got a 10.5 game lead on the Bucks. And I think the Bucks are pretty good, but 7 games over 500 or so for Milwaukee, while Cleveland is they're a machine right now. It's amazing at 37-9. So I appreciate the phone call very much, Mark. And if you want to give us a call, 866-838-4843, or you can always text the program. You can do so going Sports Radio 21,000. So we were talking about the Pro Bowl a little bit. Here's what J.J. Watt said about the Pro Bowl. When you get 5 alternates deep, and that's what they've done, because I've told you 23 players have said, no thanks. It's not worth my time. Don't need to take my family down to Orlando. Don't need any extra cash. I'm not going to participate in this farce of an event. It's a TV-made event is what it is. Anyway, he says when you get 5 alternates deep, let's just call it the Participation Bowl. That's perfect.
Love it.
I wonder how much the NFL cringes at that, considering he's on CBS on a regular basis. How much does the NFL say, you know what, come on. Do you have to take shots at us? Yes. It leads to more credibility when it comes from somebody like J.J. Watt, who has participated in the game when it actually was a game, even though it's, still kind of borderline, right? What else would you call it? What else? Give me a name for the Pro Bowl. If it's not the Participation Bowl, if it's not the Fun Bowl, here's a couple of names I came up with. Just call it the Fun Bowl. What have people said before about the NFL? What did it stand for? The No Fun League. Well, maybe this is just a fun time to be in the league. So I would call it the Fun Bowl, all right? Or the Fun League. Or how about this one? How about horsing around? Because that's all they're doing. It's just you and your buddies. That's all it is. It's you and your buddies back when you were in grade school, going to a place and playing football and having it just freelanced.
How about the Backyard Bowl for that reason?
That's a good one. I like that one. I like that one a lot. We used to do that all the time. There was a place called Michigan Bell way back in the day. I mean, you talk about dating yourself. Michigan Bell on 13 Mile and Hagerty in Farmington Hills. We would go up there on a pretty regular basis, and it didn't matter the time of year. We weren't playing high school football yet, so we were all in junior high. So we were playing junior high football. But we would go up there, and it would just be – and people would actually be working in the building. They're working, and they're watching us play outside because they're working 9 to 5 or whatever. We're done with school. What do? Jump on the bikes, and we go up to Michigan Bell. They had a massive lot, and we just played touch football, or we didn't know flag football, no, touch football or tackle football, depending on how many guys we had. And we would play in the summertime, we'd play in the fall, and we'd play in the wintertime. The wintertime was actually the best time to play it. That's what this game feels like. It feels like just what you said, the backyard football game that you and your neighbors or you and your buddies used to do. I don't know if kids do that any longer, to be honest with you. There's so many things that kids don't do anymore. I don't see nearly enough kids outside anymore. It for us, and again, it sounds like old guy, sounds like a better generation, and all that other stuff. Well, the reason it sounds that way is because it is. But it didn't matter if it was snowing outside. We would shovel the driveway and we'd play basketball. We would go to a pond and play pond hockey, even though I'm a terrible skater. We would go and we would play football outdoors. We wouldn't play baseball in the wintertime, but that's what we did. We went outside. We played stickball constantly. Give me the broom handle. Here's the racquetball, one bounce, and you're smacking it all over the place. We did it so often. We lived in Kendallwood 2. There were 3 Kendallwoods. We lived in Kendallwood 2. We would go over to the different subs, ride our bikes over to the different subs, and play games with friends of ours who lived in those subs. It was an all-day affair in the summertime. It was a big deal. So that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of that type of horsing around, that type of backyard. I really like that. I like that one better. The backyard bowl. That would be a really good one. I said just call it the NFL skills competition. Just do that. That's what it is. It isn't football. How many times you ever seen 7-on-7?
Yeah.
Anybody ever? Okay. That's the big thing these days for kids. You've got AAU for basketball. You've got travel hockey. You've got travel baseball. It's hard to get together a travel football team, isn't it? You know? Right. So what do? They do 7-on-7s.
And it also allows some of the smaller schools, it allows those kids to play if they can't field an 11-on-11 team.
Right. You got 8-on-8, right? You got 8-man teams now. But here's what you have in 7-on-7. It's just a quarterback, it's a running back, it's your wide receivers, it's your tight ends. That's what it is. And it's my 7 against your 7. And usually it's 4 teams and you do a round robin. That's what this is. This is literally 7-on-7. How is this entertaining for anybody? There's no pass rush. It's minimal contact. To me, it's just, I don't understand it, quite honestly. I don't know. I'd love to see the people. Like instead of the commissioner getting up there, and I know he's the final approval of all this stuff, and I doubt anybody's going to give them a really hard interview. I'd love one of the people who came with this idea to sit down and just ask them, hey, what's, just out of curiosity, what is your thinking here? How is this appealing to football fans? Well, we're trying to take care of the players. But you don't take care of the players during the regular season. What do you care about after the season now? I get that the Hawaii thing ran its course. Personally, I'd love to see them kind of bounce it around and take it to places at this time of the year that don't have NFL football. Wouldn't it be cool to play indoors somewhere in a city that doesn't have the NFL?
Nashville. Well, Nashville has the
Tennessee.
Titans. What am I saying?
No, they got Tennessee.
But a city like that, yeah, I got you.
Like, how about going to St. Louis? I know it's wintertime, but they've got an indoor. Go indoors there. Go to San Antonio. Play at University of Texas, San Antonio, indoors, and give them a chance to watch the NFL instead of having to travel all the way to Houston or Dallas. Move it around a little bit and give people an opportunity, to go see the NFL who don't always get a chance to do it. You get plenty of participation in it. Let's go to the phone lines. The Meyer hotline is open for you here throughout the great state of Michigan, 866-838-4843. Next up on this Wednesday morning.
Yeah, we've got Brett, and he's you've got him rolling with some thoughts on this topic.
Hi, Brett. Good morning to you.
Hey, Shep, you were bringing back nostalgia. When I was a kid, we used to play outside, but home plate and second base were in the middle of the street. And if you slid into either one, it was an automatic 2-run bonus.
Oh, really? That's cool. Because you're skinning your knees. That's awesome. So you hit a double, you're safe at second base, you get a home run. That's awesome. I didn't think about that.
Dude, what you don't realize is I grew up in Grand Rapids. Trent will know this. I grew up on the street of Division. Second base and home plate were in Division, one of the main thoroughways through Grand Rapids. We had to dodge traffic as well.
Was that baseball? Were you playing stickball? Were you playing wiffle ball? What was it? It doesn't really matter, but what was it?
We were playing baseball, and the only reason we played on the business street was because the business owners didn't care as much when we broke their windows as the homeowners did.
You got that right. The business owners are probably refreshed. I love seeing kids out there play. Do you see that very often anymore? Do you see kids doing that as much?
Shep, I'm to be honest, my oldest is only 15, and I'm one of these guilty people. I don't let them outside my house. I don't trust people with all these guns.
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right, appreciate it. Thanks, Brett. Have a great day. Always appreciate the conversation. That's when it was really fun, man, for us. And Brett's right, by the way. You want to keep your kids. For us, it was a great time because we had my mom had a whistle. My neighbor had a bell, and we would go and play baseball all day long. We'd pack a lunch and we'd play baseball all day long at the local baseball field. And when we heard the whistle and we heard the bell, because it wasn't that far away, but it was a decent distance. When we heard that, that's when we knew we had to come home for dinner. And we would scarf it down as quickly as possible so we could go back out.
Scrounge up the last bit of daylight.
As much as we possibly could.
And in the summer, sometimes those days get long. Yeah, that's awesome.
Really long in Michigan. And remember this, not all games were on TV back then. And there was no such thing as video games. So we didn't care. And television, there's no cable TV either. So we didn't care about that. No internet, no cell phones, all that stuff. How do you just survive? It's unbelievable, isn't it? All right, when we come back, do you agree with this website's Lions MVP? And another website has the best lineman in football. You might be surprised if a Lion is or is not on it. We'll get to that when we come back on X's and Bros as we begin the third and final hour on a Wednesday morning.
Hey, Michigan, let's go big. I'm Herman Moore, Lions All-Pro wide receiver, and I'm talking real big-time winning on the hottest slots and table games on one incredible app. Eagle Casino and Sports.
Sign up now and get up to $1,500. That's right. We'll match your deposit for up to $1,500, and you'll get 100 free spins.
Eagle Casino and Sports. Made in Michigan, made for Michigan.
Must be 21 or older in Michigan to play.
How would you like to be a part of the Van Andel Institute Marathon team, where you could run and raise funds for critical research into diseases like cancer and Parkinson's by running the Bank of America Chicago Marathon or the BMW Berlin Marathon? Learn more at vai.org/marathon.
The Freddy the Pizza Man Foundation is dedicated to providing support to families and Michigan schools touched by autism. We invite you to join us in supporting these families and schools by making a donation at freddythepizzaman.com. With your donation, you can help provide essential resources that can make a real impact. Visit freddythepizzaman.com to make a donation.
some facts and come back and see me. Get some facts and come back and see me. Don't throw out salaries or other things. Get some facts and come back and see me. You can't handle the truth.
I told our players, you need to be more like a dog. We don't need a bunch of cats in here. Yeah, looking in the mirror. Do I look good? I got my extra bands on. I got my other shoes on. Be a dog. We don't need no meows. We don't need no cats. We need more dogs.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
We weren't good. There's no sense asking me things about the game. I'm telling you, we laid an egg, so I'm not going to break it down for you. We sucked. We sucked. We laid an egg. That's all I have to say, guys. I'm sorry. I'm not going to break it down for you. Nothing went well for us. It's on us. We have to figure it out, and we will.
It's showtime.
Final hour of the program here on X's and Bros. Glad you're with us on this Wednesday morning. The Wire hotline is 866-838-4843. You can text the program Sports Radio to 21,000. And this hour of our program is proudly brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. They also sponsor our daily wager. We will get to that here in a moment. I read an article yesterday, CBSSports.com, where they named all the MVPs of every team. What would have been the most challenging guess or challenging choice in the National Football League this year? In other words, give me the team that you felt had the two players that were so close you maybe couldn't decide. Maybe the Lions are in that conversation. I don't know. I don't think you're going into a game in Philadelphia or going into this little game with Philadelphia and say it's anybody other than Saquon Barkley, right? Okay.
Right.
So I guessed Cincinnati. Is it Burrow?
That's a great answer.
Chase or
Trey Hendrickson.
Great
numbers from all three guys, right?
All three guys. Is there another? I was racking my brain about this last night. Is there another team that has that level? If Aiden Hutchinson had stayed healthy, you could make the argument that the Lions would have been that conversation.
Yeah,
correct?
easily could have been.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Give me another team that might be close. Can you think of one? This is challenging off the top of your head because immediately where do you go? You go to Kansas City, don't you? I mean, they're in the Super Bowl again, but maybe it's Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, maybe, but it's
Travis Kelce didn't have that great of a year. Okay,
right. It's not on that Bengals level.
You go to Buffalo. Is it James Cook and Josh Allen? And no. Answer to that is not. Where's the team? Maybe it's Washington. Maybe it's Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin had a great year, really did.
How about the Rams with Stafford and Puka Nacua?
That's pretty good. And Jared Verse. Jared Verse had a really good
year. As a rookie. No, you're right, though. This is a really tough question because
it's really hard.
You have to look at teams that have equal spread depth across, and you got to look at both offense and defense, right? And I think you're spot on with the Bengals. I mean, that's probably the toughest one, right?
Yeah, they've got to be really good depth, too. You know, you can have guys who are similar, close to one another, but I'm talking about guys who, I mean, if you think about this, again, this is me pontificating. If Aiden Hutchinson stayed healthy, Kirby Joseph led the league in interceptions. You had a guy who was going to lead the league in
a major
sacks,
statistical category. Okay? Yeah,
you had a guy who led the league in interceptions. You had a guy who was amongst the league leaders in yards and catches in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, right? And Jared Goff. Shows you the depth and the talent that the Lions have. They had it at just about every single level.
Yeah, Sewell too. Right. I love throwing him in there because I think he's the best player on the best unit. You know what I mean? So it depends how you define.
Sure, it's hard to gauge that statistic.
What the MVP is. Right.
So that's pretty impressive. But when you look at the numbers that Joe Burrow put up this year, and you look at the numbers that Jamar Chase put up this year, it was 1,700 yards for Jamar Chase. I mean, he's over. He's a full good game ahead of the next guy, right? On top of that, 17 touchdowns. He averaged 13.5 yards per catch. I mean, those are video game like numbers, man. Joe Burrow threw for almost 5,000 yards. 4,918 yards to lead the way. He threw 43 touchdowns to lead the way. And he was only picked off 9 times. On top of that, his completion percentage was at 70.5%.
And somehow that team couldn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, well, their defense and all that great, and yet we bring up Trey Hendrickson. Is there another team that you can think of that has that type of incredible balance? How
about here's another one maybe?
But Baltimore doesn't have anything outside of Lamar Jackson. There, Zay Flowers,
Derrick
Mark
Henry.
Andrews. There's no receiver, with all due respect, that makes you go, gotta have.
Right.
Okay. It's a really hard thing to have a team in the National Football League have elite players at so many different important positions like the Lions had this year. And yet, don't you think people in Cincinnati, you just said, and they didn't make the playoffs. We just talked about the depth and how good Detroit is at those key positions. If somebody's in Cincinnati, they're going, and they didn't even make the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's true. Right? That was the expectation. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's anybody else out there, dude. I don't think there's another team that can do what Cincinnati did. And I don't think there's another team that can do what Detroit did had Aiden Hutchinson stayed healthy. And I'm reading a lot into the picks, by the way. All right, but Kirby Joseph is considered one of the best safeties in football, even though there are some stupid voters out there who decided that he wasn't. My thought was Tampa.
I was going to say Baker and then Mike Evans.
And Mike Evans. They don't have the defensive side, but neither does Cincinnati with those three guys. Outside it, I think they're the only team in the AFC, and I think the Lions are the only team in the NFC that can say that. Yeah, where am I wrong?
Well, when you're going through the teams too, there are some teams where it's just with a bullet. Like the Steelers, it's TJ Watt, no question. With the Eagles, like you said, it's Saquon Barkley, no question.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to think about, I guess the depth doesn't always have to come into play if there's no clear-cut best player. And I think that's kind of where Tampa falls into. I think the Rams kind of fall into that a little bit. So it's very subjective, but I think you're onto something here with the Lions probably have the most options for an MVP of the team. And the Bengals have three really solid guys across, both sides of the football. And yet the team from top to bottom is not great.
I'm not suggesting that these guys are the best at their position. I'm saying they're amongst. Like, would you take Myles Garrett or TJ Watt off for Trey Hendrickson? Most people probably would.
Yeah,
I think Hendrickson is really underrated, but Cleveland doesn't have anybody else.
Yeah. And to be the MVP
David
of your
Njoku?
team, that's what
Come
I'm
on.
talking about. Yeah.
Exactly right. Come on. There's only two teams that can boast that kind of stuff. And it's interesting, neither one of us is in the Super Bowl. I don't know what to read into that. I just found that pretty fascinating last night. And then I looked at it and they said, so immediately I think, okay, who do they have as the Lions MVP? So for example, my fear was that everybody's going to immediately go to, if they were a halfway decent team, that they would go to quarterback.
Right.
And so what did I do? I went to Arizona and I said, if it's not Trey McBride, I'm going to be pissed. And I'm going to literally throw away this opportunity to talk about it because there's no validity there. It was Trey McBride. It wasn't Kyler Murray. Thank goodness. Who do you think they put for the Lions?
I'm going to guess they went with Goff.
No, they went with Jahmyr Gibbs.
Oh, love it. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's, from an offensive standpoint, it's right. Brian Branch had an unbelievable year. I think Brian Branch is really flipping good. If Aiden Hutchinson stays healthy, that's a big if. Okay, so you can't. Amon-Ra St. Brown had as good a year from a wide at his position that Jahmyr Gibbs did at his. Penei Sewell is one of the best, if not the best tackle in football. And Jared Goff, outside two games, and one was the biggest game against Washington, he's in that conversation too. Had they chosen Jared Goff or Amon-Ra St. Brown or Brian Branch, I would not have, or Penei Sewell, I would not have argued with it.
No, and you wouldn't be able to come up with a
good
passionate
debate about it, right?
Yeah.
You have different players on your mind and say, well, I think this guy deserves it, and here's why. That's fine. But it's hard to deny that Jahmyr Gibbs is at least in that conversation. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Okay. And especially when you factor in Montgomery going down, the offense stays afloat, stays elite, and Jahmyr Gibbs had to shoulder a lot of that.
I immediately went to the other teams in the division. Chicago went with Jalen Johnson. Outstanding cornerback. Really, really good. Okay. Part of a really good defense. Minnesota, and by the way, the Rams went with Jared Verse. So you and I were talking about how the Rams with Stafford and Nakua, I mentioned Jared Verse right away. He was right.
Okay.
Minnesota went. Who do you think they went with Minnesota?
Justin Jefferson.
Nope. Sam Darnold.
Okay, good for him.
Sam Darnold. I'm not saying that because you're not a believer. There's a lot of people.
No, it's hard to argue with that. Statistically, until the very last game of the regular season, he was lights out.
And then Green Bay, Xavier McKinney, who is in the Pro Bowl instead of Kirby Joseph, and I don't agree with it. All right, when we come back, we'll get to the final results of the poll question yesterday and our daily wager brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort after this.
It's time to go on the court.
It's a new day to celebrate and be free. It's a new day full of action and excitement because it's a day
I think Trent has come around to my line of thinking when it comes to the NFL. I don't think offensive linemen, I wouldn't say the trenches, because I think defensive linemen get plenty. And I think defensive ends get a ton. I don't think offensive linemen get nearly enough credit that they deserve. And I've said this for decades. I have been, I used to, when I was, I would say 15 years ago or so, we used to do when we were part of the Lions broadcast, we would have a special draft show leading up to the NFL draft on television in Detroit. I don't think it went statewide, but it was in television in Detroit. And oftentimes, we would have we had Jim Brandstatter, Rob Ruick, who's part of the broadcast. We had a lot of people making who they think the Lions should take. And oftentimes, I got kind of a reputation. Here we go. Shep's going to take somebody on the offensive line, because I liked guys in the past like Kevin Zeitler, like David DeCastro, like Jeff Hardings. Those were my kind of guys. I wanted the Lions to build up their offensive line. Brad Holmes has done that. I'm not saying that I'm an equivalent to a general manager. I'm just saying those were always my beliefs. Build from within. Start inside out. Everybody wants to go to the glorified positions. I don't think NFL offensive linemen get nearly enough credit. The only time they get, I shouldn't say the only time, more oftentimes than not, they're getting recognized only because of what they do wrong. We don't do that with wide receivers. He ran a wrong route. Quarterbacks, yes, you do that too. Running backs, oh, he missed the hole. How many times do you hear that?
Or he fumbled. Yeah.
Hardly ever, right? But they get all kinds of credit. And Saquon, this is what I love about Saquon Barkley. He makes sure he gives love to his guys up front. But everyone's talking about, look at this move by Saquon Barkley. Well, look at the hole. Look at Lane Johnson sealing that block that allowed him to go through it. Rarely do you see that unless we're taken to it. Unless an analyst draws it and takes us to it, we're not noticing it like we should. Finally, this website, CBSSports.com, has come out to present its first annual Offensive Lineman of the Year award. They have nominated 8 NFL players for Offensive Lineman of the Year. And they will announce the 2 finalists the week of the Super Bowl, so next week. I'm going to ask you if you recognize these names. And I want you to be honest. You ready?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Deion Dawkins.
Yeah, Bills.
Okay, good job.
He's huge, by the way. Just
Chris,
side note. He's a monster. But he's like
they're all big.
Yes.
Chris Lindstrom.
No.
Offensive guard for the Falcons. Quinn Meinerz.
No.
Offensive guard for the Broncos. Tristan Wirfs.
Yes, Tampa.
Right. And Iowa. Joe Tooney.
Chiefs.
Correct. Creed Humphrey.
Also Chiefs.
Correct. He's their center. Really does a good job in the commercial with Doritos, but he's a really good player. Lane Johnson, of course. He's a finalist. And, of course, Penei Sewell. Those are your 8 finalists. Now, you're in the minority. I don't think most people know who those guys are, especially that Deion Dawkins, really good job. But the Bills allowed the fewest sacks in the league, and he was a big reason why. Those are the 8 finalists. I think it's awesome that this website is doing this. I don't know if it catches on. I don't know how much it means to players. But I do think it gives, if people want, a chance to talk about it, because these guys deserve more love than they oftentimes get. I'm a little surprised that there's not a couple other players involved, but you got to narrow it down to 8. Who do you think are the 2 that get to the finals?
See,
this is what let me just before you answer, let me just tell you something real quick. This is what they write about Lane Johnson. And remember, I told you the story I had read about Lane Johnson, who had Penei Sewell's stats up in his locker, and his stats are better than Penei Sewell's. That's what the national media is saying. Here's what they write about with Lane Johnson. There's no question Johnson is the class of the right tackles. I'm like, really? I thought Penei Sewell. Johnson's been dominant for a long time, widely known among smart NFL people that when you take Johnson off the field, the Eagles offense can get bogged down. That's how good he is. So when I read that, because I kind of read the synopsis of each guy, I thought, okay, wait a minute. If he's the class of the right tackles, what are they going to say about Penei Sewell? Because that was my assumption. At least that's how I look at it. And you know me, I watch the line a lot in every game. Here's what they write about Penei Sewell. What do you need to say? This dude's an incredible pass protector and an absolute destroyer in the run game. Someone who can get out in space and snuff out defenders. Oh, yeah. And you can design offensive plays around him. And I thought, see, there you go. I knew it. Just because they wanted to throw the football to him, just because he looked like he might throw the football on one play, it takes away from who he really is, his definition. The cutesy stuff that we see in the NFL a lot of times, immediately that's what we say. Dan Skipper, love that he can catch a touchdown pass. What did they write about the other day? Remember I brought up the free agents and Dan Skipper. What was in that? He can catch a touchdown. Come on.
Yeah, it gives people a false sense of reality as to what their strengths actually are.
He's been doing this for 8 years in Detroit. He's got one touch, and people think, okay, suddenly this is who he is. I don't get it. I don't get it. But it'll be interesting to see who the two are, especially because you've got a couple of Chiefs in there, and they've helped their team get to the Super Bowl because of what they said about Lane Johnson, and because Deion Dawkins is the best lineman, like you said earlier about Penei Sewell when we were talking about the Lions MVP. You said Penei Sewell because he's on the best unit on that team. Deion Dawkins, you could argue, if you're Buffalo, are you not saying, wait a minute, we've given up the fewest sacks? A lot of that has to do with Josh Allen. We've given up the fewest sacks. Don't you think we should be in the conversation for best offensive line? I think Philly, I admitted this to a friend of mine the other day. I was steadfast. The Lions' offensive line is the best in the NFL. Philly's is better. It is. How can you not come to that conclusion? When a guy rushes for over 2,000 yards, when they had the success they had against the team that beat the crap out of you, tell me how you can argue it. You can't. You can't. Philly had the best offensive line. And if that's the case, and Lane Johnson is considered their best offensive lineman, how could he not be in the mix?
Yeah, same logic. You're right. Yeah. And you know what? I think this is kind of a reality check for Lions fans.
I hope so.
Because sometimes I just flippantly say, "Oh, it's the best O-line in the league." Well,
no, you say it all the time. Not the best. Not sometimes. But I said it too. I said
Chiefs
it too.
They've got 2 of the 8 finalists. The Chiefs have 2 of the 8 finalists on their list. So you got to kind of you have to look at things objectively here, especially given the way that the season ended for Detroit. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't mean that we don't respect the Lions' offensive line and that we love all those guys. I think when healthy, I'd probably go back to it. I would remind everybody, Kevin Zeitler was out against Washington. No knock on any of the depth that Detroit has, but I want to remind people that. But Philly's offensive line is really impressive. All right, let me get to the final results of yesterday's poll question. We have one for you every day on our website, or as we tweet one out. Do you think the Red Wings are a playoff team? Yes or no? That's what we asked you. What's the answer?
67% say yes. 2/3 of you believe.
Good.
Gotta love it.
I hope so. How about the Daily Wager? You've been on a roll lately. It's brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort and their sportsbook Ascend. Great place to watch games, and you can watch the Pistons and Pacers tonight with a really good menu and a lot of fun people to hang out with. Tell me what you did yesterday and what you got for us today.
Yeah, last night, unfortunately, I got cute. I took Michigan State minus 13.5, which hit, but I parlayed it with CMU minus 7.5 at Buffalo, and they got beat outright. So, Daily Wager, thumbs down. Although, if you took MSU, you won some money.
Why do you
think
you know the MAC?
I don't know the MAC, admittedly.
Right. So
my brother told me as soon as I told him what it was, he's like, dude, that bet's not hitting.
So did your buddy's grandfather. Okay, what is tonight?
Cade Cunningham to hit at least 3 3-pointers against the Pacers.
You're going a lot of Cade Cunningham lately.
It's hard not to.
Is there? It's incredible, man.
It's hard not to.
You need a pillow next to him. We'll have another one for you tomorrow when we come back. Is this guy this team? When can we admit that this young player is now our team's best player? We'll discuss after this. shouldn't I be reading eligibility restrictions to apply and then read what those restrictions are? That's how it's supposed to go. 21 years or older, Michigan only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. That comes after eligibility restrictions do apply. That's how it should be read. Anyway,
Little out of order then, huh?
Little out of order. Yeah. No, you're out of
messed
order.
up.
Yeah. No, you're out of order. Okay. Let me ask you this: who's the best player on the Red Wings? Go quickly.
Dylan Larkin.
That's what I would say. My son and I had this conversation at the gym yesterday, in between sets. You know, you got to stay huge. Anyway, why isn't it Lucas Raymond?
It could be.
Yeah, but you didn't even hesitate.
Right, because you know what? I've been wired that way, I guess, for the last 5 years. It's been Dylan Larkin.
We have to try and figure that out.
Yeah.
Lucas Raymond has 23 points, 7 goals, 16 assists since Todd McClellan took over. 16 games, 23 points, 7 goals, 16 assists. During that time, maybe you think that's a small sample size, and that would be, so I suppose, fair. During that time, he is second in the National Hockey League in points, tied with guess who? David Pastrnak. Now, to your point and mine, when my son and I were having this conversation, Dylan Larkin has 21 points during that same stretch. It's not like that's bad, right? I mean, that's still a hell of a roll. Pretty damn good, don't you think? I do. Yes. Okay. Dylan Larkin is one of those guys who seems like, you know, he's a great leader. I think he is. I do. I mean that. I think he's, and I don't use that word lightly. I think the way he handles himself, the way he promotes other players on his team, I think he's exactly what you want a leader to be.
And he earned that captain spot too.
For sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
More than his fair share.
The C, especially in hockey, it's not about who's the best player. It's oftentimes, I mean, do you think Steve Eisman was the best player on their Stanley Cup teams?
Fedorov.
Yeah, it was Sergei Fedorov. It really was. And you could argue Nick Lidstrom. But Yzerman, his leadership, it's the way you lead oftentimes. And I think Larkin does a hell of a job. He's not their leading scorer, which is funny because, and it's a little, mixed message on my part here. You and I both said Larkin right away. He's the captain. He's the guy who's gone through hell with this franchise. Just crap teams. And there's a part of us, I think, collectively, like you've been able to separate Michigan State and Michigan there. You don't look at him as a Michigan player. You look at him as a Red Wing captain. He is a guy who I think there's a part of us that says, you know what? We want it for him because he's had to endure a lot of crap, just like Steve Yzerman had to endure a lot of crap. When they were the dead things, when they were giving cars away at Joe Louis Arena, when they couldn't draw people there, Steve Yzerman was the guy who gave them hope. Dylan Larkin, very similar in that regard. I think he's endearing to the fan base because the fan base has seen what he's had to go through some bad coaches and some bad times with very little help. But Lucas Raymond, so right there, when I say, well, he's the captain, he's been through it, it's the emotional part, isn't it, Trent? It's me talking about the emotional side of things. Then I say, when are we going to start talking about like Lucas Raymond's the best player on this team? Why? Because he has the most points? Because he's another 20-goal scorer? Because he's been on this role since Todd McClellan took over? Which is it? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Because it's not like Dylan Larkin is strictly an emotional side of things because he's pretty damn good. I just mentioned the role he's been on. He leads the team in goals. And he's second on the team in points. So it's a little bit of a challenging situation and a good debate, by the way, a really good debate on who that team, not that they have it internally, but on who that team's best player is. I was just wondering if you had the same belief that I did and if people had any thoughts on it on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. Mo Sider said this. He says, I think Raymond can take games over by himself. He and Dylan are the motors of our up front lineup right now, and they're driving. Todd McClellan said that this is a dangerous thing to say, but because people take it out of context. When you compare a player who has not yet arrived to one of your franchise's all-time greats, and who during his tenure was considered one of the best players in his sport, that's a dangerous thing to do to the young kid. Ask Sparky Anderson. Well, you can't do that now, but Sparky Anderson, that's what happened with Kirk Gibson. That's what happened with Torey Lovello. And it happens with a lot. That's why so many of us in the media and fans want an immediate comparison of a guy we have. Who does he remind you of? That's oftentimes what a media question is. And I've asked it plenty. Who does he remind you of? Coaches are a little hesitant when it comes to that because of the pressure they put on that guy, and because you're immediately, if he reminds you of a great all-time player in your franchise or the sports history, people will run with that and say, that's what the expectation is. And that's really difficult to do. Really tough. So Todd McClellan was asked about Lucas Raymond. And McClellan said, I said one day, he reminds me a little of Zetterberg. You could open up a whole book of adjectives to describe Zetterberg. I could probably do that for Lucas right now. He's a complete player. He plays all three zones. Again, something that we don't recognize. Coaches do, other players do. We don't. We see him lugging the puck. We see him reach the middle of the ice, backhanded pass in the middle, beautiful saucer pass down low, rip it up the wall, rip it up the end boards to make sure you're keeping it in, park himself in the right spot on the power play. We're looking at all these things. How responsible is he in each of the three zones? Offensively, the neutral zone, and defensively. Todd McClellan sees that. Says he plays all three zones, plays them equally hard. He values each of the three as importantly as the stat sheet. I don't want to say it's hard to find players like that, but when you do, you treasure them. That's a lot. That's high praise. High praise for Lucas Raymond to be compared to Henrik Zetterberg, who is a Hall of Famer and considered one of this franchise's all-time greats. That's saying something too, man, because this franchise has had some of the greatest players the sport has ever seen. Interesting, I thought, based on what the coach has said right there. All right, I want to know the difference. I want to know the difference between getting somebody over the top and getting a team close. Because when Buffalo lost in the AFC Championship game in Kansas City, and now Josh Allen is 0-4 against the Chiefs in the playoffs, do you know what the unison chant in Buffalo was? Fire Sean McDermott. I'm not going to argue that they're wrong here. What I want to know is, how do you define a guy who can get you to a certain level, but you need somebody else to take you over the top? We need the guy who can push us past that. Like Jacques Demers was really good as a coach for the Detroit Red Wings. They didn't feel like he was ever going to win a cup. He actually later did in Montreal. The need was, and these were shows that I was part of, the belief was Scotty Bowman or somebody of that ilk is the guy who can take you over the top. Who's the coach who gets you there? Like it or not, that's what people have said about J.B. Bickerstaff. I don't think that's fair. But they've said, you've got to use a guy like this who can take you to a certain point and then see if there's somebody else you can go get and close the deal. It's kind of like if you're in sales, who's the closer? What did I say yesterday about Wink Martindale and the defensive coordinator for the Michigan Wolverines? He's not going into a 17-year-old's family room or going to the gym or going to his practice facility and saying, hey, I want to see this kid work out. You get him on the line and you want him to close the deal, sure. But he's not going to doing that stuff. Salespeople, I need a closer. I've got this client who's ready to bite, but I just can't seem to close the deal, so they bring in the quote-unquote big guns. Oftentimes that happens in coaching. You got us so far, but we need someone to take us over the top. That's how Buffalo feels about Sean McDermott. Is that a hot take, or is that something that is emotional, or is it legit?
I think it's very emotional, but I do think it's justified. I do. Because you look at he's been there since 2017. So this entire iteration of Josh Allen's Bills, he's been the guy. And as good as they are every single year, they won the division. I think every year since Josh Allen entered his, all-star Pro Bowl status, they haven't been to the Super Bowl. And I to them, that's the standard. They have been knocking on that door now for 5 years, and they've never actually made it. Picture the Lions in 5 years.
How can it be the standard if they've never been there?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Their season has ended.
Standard because they've been there regularly. That's their standard.
You could say the same thing about the Ravens, by the way. The difference there is John Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl, so it's a little different, right?
Perhaps. I mean,
I
don't know how
their season
long
ends
that
with
leash is,
disappointment.
Trent, to be honest with you, because Mike Tomlin's won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
If you win, that's an interesting question. If you win a Super Bowl, how long do you get to relish?
How much time does that buy you? It's a good question.
Because people in Pittsburgh are starting to get a little pissed off about Mike Tomlin. Look, dude, he's 0 for his last 6.
Yeah.
In playoffs. He's getting bounced regularly. Who's the guy to take you over the top to get you that final game? And what is the difference between them? It's a really, like, if it's not Sean McDermott, and I get it. I mean, you're like, that's the standard. The standard for them has been the playoffs.
How about this? That's been their goal. It's every team's goal. That sounds obvious. But for them, it's a realistic goal, and they haven't even gotten there yet, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I feel like at this point, their season ends in heartbreaking disappointment every single year because they truly believe, and we believe too, that they were good enough to make it there this year. They fell short.
Yes.
For, the 8th time under Sean McDermott. So I think, yes, it can be over emotional on the Bills fans' part to, start chanting fire McDermott right after the season ends. But I kind of get where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how this Lions fan base would feel in 5-6 years if the Lions never end up making it to a Super Bowl with this group. They're going to be disappointed. I think they might fall, the Dan Campbell biting kneecaps thing might fall pretty stale by that point. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely. I think it's safe to say. I hope we've moved past the biting kneecap stuff. That's already been proven. That's all bunk. Okay?
Right.
It's that it actually does work. My question is, when you have certain Casey Jones, this used to be the problem with Casey Jones when he was in Boston. Could you get to the championship? Could you finally break through against whoever it may be, Philadelphia in the East, Lakers in the West, whoever it may be? Could you finally get there? And they did. How long do you give an individual to get that done? What if that player, what if that coach, Marv Levy's a good example, in Buffalo, 4 straight Super Bowls. I'm sure they were by the 4th one. It wouldn't surprise me if members of Bill's Mafia said, he can't win the big game.
Right. After you do it 4 times, and I guess that's the whole thing with this McDermott team.
Okay,
they haven't even
let me ask you
there.
this. Why didn't they say that in Detroit about Jim Leland?
Good question. They got to the World Series twice at least.
Yeah. Well, wait, you said at least. You're saying, Sean, if you're saying it would be a little bit more acceptable if Sean McDermott got his team to the Super Bowl, right?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Okay. So then I ask myself this question. What if Kansas City is just that good?
Right.
And it doesn't matter who the coach on the other side is. And by the way, what about the player? What about the player? There was an incredible, I'm going to give you a really impressive statistic here in a minute. Let me get to a quick text. And I know you've got one. So fire away, and then I'm going to give you the stat. Go ahead.
Texter says, that's why the Detroit Pistons had to go hire Larry Brown to get them to the next level.
Yeah.
Across sports example.
But I would remind you that Rick Carlisle eventually won a championship. Did he
Yeah,
not?
and they also didn't stick with Larry Brown for very long. But yeah,
Well,
I get the point they're
because
making.
he's an absolute, he's a vagabond.
He's always
that's-
looking to
That's just
steps
who he
ahead.
is.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily blame him on that, but I wouldn't say that. I don't care. I mean, they didn't stay with him because he's never satisfied ever. Okay.
Yes, but fair example, I guess. The texter bringing up, the Pistons having a core in place, making runs, and then making a move to make the jump with a different coach, and then getting through and winning the championship. That's what I think Bills fans might want. It's not even necessarily
I'm bringing up Kansas City in the sense that perhaps they're just that good. I heard this on a podcast yesterday. Trey Wingo said it. And I'm going to get the numbers kind of messed up, so I apologize in advance. But when you look at the number of teams or quarterbacks who have had to lead their team on game-winning drive in one-possession games in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes is 7 for 7. 7 for 7. Nobody else is close. Yeah. So maybe, just maybe, Kansas City is just that
inevitable.
Good.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way,
doesn't it? I mean,
yes.
If you want to, you want to blame Buffalo. I get it. There's a lot of disappointment there. You thought maybe this was the year. You're wondering when the year is. But if you keep running into the team that is the best of the decade, then how much of it is on the coach? How much of it is on the player and players? Okay, it's not just one player either, by the way. But Josh Allen, obviously the old cliche, you can't fire all the teams, so you got to fire the coach.
Yeah, someone's got to take the fall.
Yeah, but they're winning divisions. They're getting their chances. I don't know if that necessarily means as much to people. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with a Monday morning overreaction as well. Our thanks to you for your phone calls and your texts. Always appreciate it. Always enjoyable. Hope you can enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and hope you can join us again tomorrow morning here on X's and Bros. We begin the program 6 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And on these same great station affiliates, you can check out Bill Simonson and The Huge Show later today at 3. Have a great Wednesday, everybody.
Huge here for the Michigan High School Athletic Association. You can stay